that, today on the call we have Kaitlyn Shepherd and Bob Luebke, both from the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. For many of you, they should be familiar faces. They present often with us at Callan. And with that, Kaitlyn, I will turn the floor over to you to get started with our presentation.
Well, thank you, Bryce. Let me go ahead and I have some slides ready. Let me go and see if I can share those. All right. Hopefully these are on the screen. All right, here we go. Good to be with you all this afternoon. My name is Kaitlyn Shepherd. I am the Education Policy Analyst with the John Locke Foundation Center for Effective Education. Like Bryce mentioned on the call, we also have Bob Luebke, who is the director of our center. Just going to be talking a little bit about a legislative preview in North Carolina and what to look forward to this session. So Bryce went over a little bit of this, but just to go over again what we're going to be talking about. First, I'll go over a little bit of what does the legislative session look like in North Carolina? Who are the key players? Then we'll look back at the 2025 long session, cover a major education-related policy that was passed last year. Then we'll look forward to this year in 2026, what we may be able to expect with the legislature this session. And then I'll kick it over to Bob, and he'll be covering some of the results of our annual education poll that just came out at the end of January, looking at a variety of education-related topics of interest, and hopefully time for Q&A at the end. So jumping right into it, in North Carolina, our General Assembly meets in what's called a legislative biennium. So basically what this means is that there's the long session in the odd-numbered years, and then we have the short session in the even-numbered years. So 2025, that was our long session. Typically, that's January through July, although there's not really a set end date. And in recent years, it's been much longer than July. And the major thing that happens usually during the long session is that the General Assembly adopts a budget for the state for the next 2 years. And like we've mentioned, North Carolina last year was the only state not to pass a state budget. So definitely led to some uncertainty there on financial matters. One thing on education that the lack of the budget has kind of affected is teacher raises. We had some disagreement in the House and the Senate budget proposals over how much to raise teacher pay. In the House, it was about an increase of 8.7% over the biennium. They also wanted to reinstate master's pay for teachers. The Senate, a little bit lower, recommended a 3.3% raise and a $3,000 bonus. And then you had Governor Stein, who in his proposal wanted to raise teacher pay by more than 10% and reinstate master's pay for teachers. So kind of across the board there in what people are wanting to see teacher raises look like. And I think lack of the budget there has really led to some uncertainty there on what that final number is going to look like. And then in 2026, we will have our short session. Like the name suggests, typically it's a lot shorter in duration, usually starts about May. This year set to begin at the end of April. And usually what happens during the short session is adjustments to the budget. Typically, we don't see as big of policy proposals since only certain kinds of bills are being considered. Those that have passed the chamber, recommendations from a study commission, and then budget issues. So the makeup of the General Assembly, similar to last year, the Republicans do have a majority in both chambers, but they did lose their supermajority in 2024. So what that means for them is that if they pass a policy, Governor Stein vetoes it, they will need to work with Democrats in the House to get the votes necessary to override that veto. In the House, we've got 120 members, current speakers Destin Hall. The Senate, 50 members. The person kind of running the day-to-day operations of the Senate, of course, Phil Berger. And then Rachel Hunt, our lieutenant governor, presides over it, votes in the case of a tie. Um, so that's what the current makeup of the legislature is looking like. So let's look back at 2025, the long session. Again, not many huge education-related policies like we've seen in some past years. One that I did want to talk about was House Bill 959, this one dealing with phone-free schools. So in passing this law, just went into effect at the beginning of this year, means that North Carolina joins 32 other states in working to restrict cell phone use in the classroom. Under the bill, local school boards are required to have a policy that prohibits students from using, displaying, or having a wireless communication device turned on during instructional time. A couple things to notice with that definition, I think. One, it's broader than just cell phones, so other kinds of devices like laptops and things like that would be included and envisioned under that policy. And it does only apply during instructional time. We've seen other states across the country move to these bell-to-bell policies where they're not allowing cell phones at any point during the school day, but in North Carolina, just during instructional time. And of course, there are exceptions under the law for educational, medical, or emergency use. And not only are we seeing kind of a swell around the country of support for these kind of a policies, I think in North Carolina, we're also seeing broad public support. And at the Locke Foundation, we have polled on this question. I think the most recent one was March of 25. And what we found in that poll was that 68% of people who responded to our survey said that students should not be allowed to have smartphones in class. So broad public support for the policy and one of the more impactful policies, in my view, that was passed during the long session last year. So looking ahead to 2026, looking ahead at the short session that I'll start here shortly, some of the things that they will be considering possibly are some veto overrides of legislation that was passed and then vetoed by Governor Stein. A couple of these are related. The first one being House Bill 171. This is a bill that prohibits diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, in state agencies. So under this bill that we're looking at, the override here, state agencies cannot use DEI in hiring or employment matters, offer or require DEI training, or maintain any kind of a DEI office or staff members. In addition, agencies may not use funds to host DEI programs or accept federal money that requires compliance with DEI type requirements. So an effort by the General Assembly to kind of get DEI out of our state agencies. But, Governor Stein has not agreed with this bill and has vetoed it. So it'll be interesting to see, if the General Assembly, it's been on the calendar a few times in recent months. I believe it was on the calendar for earlier this week when the General Assembly was in session. Of course, they did not take it up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this bill, whether the General Assembly is able to get the votes to override that veto and have this go into law. Related is Senate Bill 227. This deals with prohibiting DEI specifically in K-12 public education. And under this bill, the public school units are not able to engage in or advocate for discriminatory practices, and that is a list of things that are defined in the statute. Compel students, teachers, or other people working at the school to profess belief in these divisive concepts, instruct students about them, offer professional development that includes or advocates for these kind of divisive concepts, maintain a DEI office or one that otherwise may not have that name, but promotes these ideas, and then employing someone whose job is to promote these discriminatory concepts and practices that are seen in the law. In addition, the State Board of Education is not able to approve, provide, recommend, or require professional development in DEI. So kind of related to the first bill, but dealing specifically with K-12 schools. Again, the governor has vetoed both of these. So it'll be interesting to see what the General Assembly is able to do with those. Other pieces of legislation to know, I think one of them is House Bill 87. This is another bill that has passed the General Assembly but has been vetoed by the governor. This is the Federal Tax Credit Scholarship Program. And under this bill, a individual taxpayer can contribute up to $1,700 to a scholarship granting organization that provides scholarships to eligible students, and then in return, they receive a dollar for dollar credit on their federal taxes. So, an effort kind of nationally to increase school choice in states that may not already have a state policy, especially. So North Carolina was actually poised to become the first state that would have opted into this program with the passage of the bill. But since it's been awaiting a veto override, other states have gone ahead of North Carolina, kind of leapfrogged over us and opted into this program. Um, so right now, where that bill is there are guidance and regulations at the federal level that are pending with the federal government and the Treasury Department, I believe, just as to how that program will be implemented, who in the state is able to opt the state in, what kind of students are eligible, what the regulations look like for the scholarship granting organizations that are going to be distributing this money for students' education. So big questions there, and maybe Bob you have some insights to share on that. I know you've done a lot of research on this bill, but some important implementation questions outstanding, I believe, on that one.
Yes, that's right, Kaitlyn. As most of you know, Governor Stein had vetoed the bill in August of last year, and in his veto statement, he seems like he left a little wiggle room in there. He acknowledged the benefits of school choice, but he didn't see how that particular program would benefit public schools. We're actually involved in an effort to actually show them how that is the case because uh, under the current instructions or the conditions of the legislation, it will benefit, the tax credit would benefit public school students as well as private school students. So we're hoping that North Carolina will be opting in to that program shortly.
Very good. And the last one I wanted to cover for this part of our time today is House Bill 981. This deals with open enrollment in public schools. And open enrollment is a type of choice in the public school environment that allows families to choose a traditional public school other than their assigned one based on zip code, as long as space is available at their desired school. And so there was some effort with this bill being introduced last session to have a policy like this in North Carolina. Now, other states across the country have taken a variety of approaches on this, and depending on the policy, they can just be a little bit different. So, some states have adopted what we call inter-district open enrollment, and under this policy, families can choose a public school outside their home district. And a lot of states have done intra-district, which is a form of within district transfers. So under an intra-district policy, a family can choose a school within their home district. So if it may not be the one that they're assigned to based on their address, but it could be another one in their home school district. And in North Carolina last session, House Bill 981 was introduced, and in its original form, it would have established across the state this within district open enrollment. And it would have allowed families to choose whichever public school they want in their district, provided that there's space. It would have also required districts to adopt a policy on this to post monthly capacity information for grades at their school. And families' transfer requests would have been denied for limited reasons, such as space, and families would have had a right to appeal that if their request to transfer was denied. So, an effort at the state level to provide more choices for families within the public school. But as the course of the session went on, the bill was revised. And so in its current form, it's more of a study bill. So it would require the Department of Public Education to, public instruction to study and report on how districts can implement this within district open enrollment. So kind of taking a step back, getting more information about open enrollment and looking at some of those barriers to implementing that in districts and how it can be implemented successfully. And again, like with the cell phone bill, we know in North Carolina, there's actually very strong public support for this issue. And Bob may touch on it a little bit later in his remarks, but in our January poll, we asked this question on within district open enrollment and found that 79% of people who responded to our survey said that they would support this policy for North Carolina students. And so something that not only a lot of other states are going with to increase choice within the public districts for students, but also strong support in North Carolina. So those are just some of the bills that we might be seeing some movement on this session. And I will go ahead and toss it over to Bob, and I think he's going to talk some more about additional poll results.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Luebke. I'm the director for the Center for Effective Education of the John Locke Foundation. I want to thank Kaitlyn for providing that overview of the last couple of years. It's actually been an odd time with what's been going on post-COVID, some of the vetoes, et cetera. Even though it's been a long session, there hasn't been, it's one of these sessions that's been short on a lot of concrete education initiatives, which I think is good every now and then. It gives you a sense to kind of catch your breath. But what I wanted to do now in the last 15, 20 minutes is go over some of the results. I kind of selected a number of questions out of our January education poll that we do annually at the John Locke Foundation and share some of the results uh, with our attendees today, just on questions I think they'd probably have interest in. The questions are in a number of areas: school satisfaction, some attitudes, or some general question or general results of school choice support or disapproval, school spending questions, open enrollment, ideas about tax credit scholarships. And then actually also asked a question on how you would grade your local school board, which I'm sure everybody would be interested in a question like that. But why don't we start off, first of all, and Kaitlyn or Kayla, I think you've got that. Why don't you back up one slide, if you would, please? Uh, the first one right there, a little bit just about the poll. Uh, we poll about 700 likely voters in North Carolina. This year's poll went out from January 22nd to the 25th, and we had a margin of error of about 3.7%. This year's poll was a little larger than the ones we had in the past. Usually about 600 voters. So this year, we upped that number a little bit, and just hoping to get a little tighter results, which obviously the margin of error will reflect that. So, our first question, next slide, please, Kayla, is on local school satisfaction. We poll this question just about every year. The columns on top there give results for 3 years data from January 24 to January 26th. And what you can see from the results is basically kind of a change. The second year dissatisfaction went up 7%, but then went down from 25 to 26, which is a good thing. But if you look at the net result of the numbers of dissatisfied, satisfied, you still have a negative the last 2 years, but it went down. The actual dissatisfaction differential went from 22% in 25 down to about 12% in 26. So that's a good thing. People are less dissatisfied. I think some of that dissatisfaction is some of the residue left over from COVID, and people are feeling ornery. about a lot of education issues, dissatisfied whether the reasons are legitimate or not, but parents have been surly about a lot of education issues lately, and that's reflected in the poll. As I said before, that dissatisfaction number with local schools has gone down almost half, well, about 10 points from the previous years. So, and where, I mean, who's dissatisfied? We can look at, kind of the heat map underneath. There's columns there. If you look at the number of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats in the middle there, where those blue boxes are, you can see those are pretty strong differentials. Republicans are strongly dissatisfied, 56 to 25. Independents, 53% to 32, and Democrats are more satisfied, less dissatisfied by a margin of about 47 to 33. So one's politics explains most of that dissatisfaction, and that makes sense. Again, we poll on this question every year. This was the local school satisfaction question. Now, we also polled a question on statewide school satisfaction. Can you give us the next slide, Kayla? We do this because of what's often known as a congressional effect. People like People dislike Congress, but they like their local congressman. And that seems to be the case with their with their local schools as well. People like their local schools, but they don't necessarily like what's going on across the state in in a lot of schools statewide. So, how do people feel about statewide schools? They're more dissatisfied than satisfied by a ratio of about 53% to 29%. 53% dissatisfied, 29% satisfied. So that's a differential of about 23% dissatisfied, which is significant and almost by intensity, almost twice what the local dissatisfaction was. So you can see that effect, that statewide effect, uh, people feeling less comfortable or less satisfied with the statewide education issues is definitely in effect here. Again, if we look at some of the crosstabs here, the uh, party registration, Republican, Independent, or Democrat, it gives somewhat insight into this again, the differentials. Number of Republicans dissatisfied, 60%, satisfied, 22%. Independents, satisfied, 26, dissatisfied, 59. Those obviously strong dissatisfied numbers. With regards to Democrats, it's almost evenly split at 40-42. So that's where I think a lot of the dissatisfied numbers get their strength from, obviously, from Republicans, Independents, less so from Democrats. Then on the next slide, we had two questions on some of the larger choice programs in North Carolina, the Opportunity Scholarship and also charter schools. First, we'll deal with the Opportunity Scholarship Program. The question there is on the top. I'll read it here. It says, all North Carolina families are eligible to apply for taxpayer-funded scholarships through the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Scholarships are awarded on a sliding scale, prioritizing lowest family incomes. Awards range from $3,500 to $7,700 and can be used to attend a private school of their choice. In 2025-26, more than 100,000 students have received Opportunity Scholarship Awards. Do you support or oppose the Opportunity Scholarship Program? The columns there list poll results to this question from January 23 to January 26. What you can see here is the support has gone down about 4 percentage points in the last 3 years. The opposition has gone up about 7 points, but still a fairly strong number, 64%. Uh, if you look at, I mean, who supports the program, who opposes it, again, party registration, actually tells a lot about how people answered those questions. Republicans, 72% of Republicans support OSP, the Opportunity Scholarship Program, 21% oppose. Independents, 61% support, 34% oppose. And even amongst Democrats, 59% of Democrats support the program, 33% oppose. Um, Again, those numbers are fairly strong. I think what's worth noting here is, again, that's kind of a 4-point slide in support from January 23. Also, what's worth noting is farther on down that scale by income, you can see some of the incomes, some of the support by income slides a little bit from 78% of those respondents with 40,000 or less income, and then with those at 100K down to about 57%. So that's generally been the case, I think, in the last 3, 4 years that program has the support for it has been inversely proportional. Although I wonder if that'll change now in the last 2 years since um, there's no means testing on accessing the benefits of that program, even though the awards are tied to income, um, are tilted more towards lower income recipients. Even higher income people can still be eligible for smaller awards. So that'll be interesting to find out how that changes. Again, the next uh, page we have a question on charter school support. Charter schools, as everyone knows, are public schools. There are about 200 charter schools across North Carolina, enroll about 125,000 students, and have been in North Carolina since about 1996. We polled a similar question that's listed above. It says charter schools are public schools that are governed by an independent board instead of a local school board. While charter schools are subject to the same academic and testing requirements as traditional public schools, they are exempt from certain administrative regulations in the areas of hiring, budgeting, and curriculum design. Knowing this, do you support or oppose charter schools? Again, we have the results here from the last 3 years. And what's noticeable to most people is the slide in support. It's down, support is down about 11 points from January 23, opposition up almost the equivalent amount. But I think the differential is about 11%, 11.3% slide in support, 11.3% gain in opposition. That I'm sure for supporters of charter schools is concerning. Still, the numbers are over 50%, not near where they were 2, 3 years ago. And I don't know if this is, a short-term trend or if that will reverse in the years ahead, but it's certainly something worth watching. Next slide.
Bob, just quickly on the charter
Sure.
school point, is it true that over that period that we're seeing sort of a decline in reported public support, we're seeing a rise in enrollment in charters?
Yeah. Charter school enrollment really, I don't want to say it really took a explosive uh, turn during COVID. It went up quite a bit. People were looking for other educational options. One of the factors here that clouds much of the results here is still a large number of people are confused about the status of charters. Charters, as I said before, are public schools. A lot of people still think they're private and they wonder if they charge tuition. Now, some of the problems between charters and traditionals have been with regards to um, where the money comes from. I mean, there's local school districts have to pass through the money to local charters, and there's been a lot of contention about what should be passed through, how much should be passed through, etc. And there's been a lot of contention there. So with public schools saying that charter schools are siphoning off money, and charter schools often contending that they're not getting their fair share. But yes, I mean, to your question, has this been going on? The enrollment jumps have been going on at the same time that the popularity or support for charters has been declining. So, and then the next slide, we asked a couple of questions on finance, on school finance and spending levels. Uh, the question reads, to the best of your knowledge, which of the following ranges best reflects the average per pupil spending for K-12 public schools in North Carolina? Your estimate should include the combined expenditures of state, federal, and local governments. I love uh, giving this question out all the time because um, I'd like to know, it's really important to know if people understand or people understand how much is being spent on K-12 schools. And if they think it's the right amount or they think it's not the right amount, etc. And we poll on this question frequently. The two columns, you can see the ranges for the question are from 0 to 5,000, 5 to 10,000, 10 to 15,000, 15,000, and then unsure. What this largely says, the column on the left is the previous year results. But what this largely says is people aren't happy and people don't know. I mean, last year we polled on this and 37% of people were unsure. This year that went down a little bit to about 33%. Still, that's a third of people have absolutely no idea how much we spend on education. The correct amount, the correct number here, or the correct range here is the 10,000 to 14,999, which meant about 1 in 5 of our respondents had the correct answer. Um, and then the next question, Kayla, we actually told them what that number was. The average per pupil spending combined federal, state, and local expenditures for K-12 students in North Carolina is 13,100. Do you consider this to be too much, too little, the appropriate amount, or unsure? As you can see from the response there, about 43% said it's too little. Uh, about another third said it was either too much or the appropriate amount. And about 1 in 4 recipients or respondents said they're basically unsure. So about 43% said it's too little. And, that's a fairly high amount, as well as the 1 in 4 basically saying they're unsure. Basically, what I get from this, and this has been a common problem, is people don't know how much school, people don't know how schools are funded, nor how much schools are funded, and it comes out in a lot of the data, and that's an area where we're trying to work and educate people about how uh, allotment formulas work, how North Carolina funds schools, et cetera, and just um, allowing people to know what's being spent and whether they feel like it's being spent the way they want it to be spent, et cetera. So again, finance here, an issue here, which comes up um, all the time. It's just another way to highlight that the message of how we fund schools or how complicated the system is that we use to fund schools needs to be changed and it needs to be simplified. So next page, please. Okay, this is a question that we had. We asked about charter schools, and as many of you probably know, North Carolina does not provide aid for capital facilities for charter schools. That question has come up in the past, and we decided to ask how voters feel about that. And the question was, currently the state provides no funding to charter schools for their facilities. Would you support or oppose state government providing money to charter schools to help obtain land and buildings for schools? Bottom line, that public is evenly split on that question. Um, you can see again if you look at some of the regions and if you look at uh, the splits amongst Republicans, independents, and Democrats. Republicans strongly support it, 60 to 34. Democrats strongly oppose such legislation by a 56 to 38 margin. Independents also oppose it by a margin of 53 to 42%. So this looks like um, it's heading into some, you know, pretty significant wins as far as support. It's something a lot of charter schools I think would want because the costs of the capital costs in most budgets are comprised almost 25 to 30% of charter schools, but it doesn't seem, well, it seems right now that the public is evenly divided as to whether or not they wanted to finance such provisions. So the next question, open enrollment. Kaitlyn had spoken earlier about open enrollment as one of the pieces of legislation that was introduced last year. We polled on that a pretty general question, and it reads, intra-district open enrollment, and just parenthetically, we do realize there's intra-district and there's inter-district. The question here deals only with intra-district. Okay, so intra-district open enrollment in a K-12 public school allows students enrolled in a public school to select and transfer to a public school of their choice within the child's school district, rather than their assigned school. Transfers are allowed on a first-come, first-served basis, provided there is space. Do you support or oppose intra-district open enrollment in public schools? Again, we polled on this last year and this year. This year, the numbers went up about 7%, 7% bump up to about almost 79% from about 72% last year. The opposition dropped, or the percent of those that oppose this open enrollment dropped from about 21% to about 13%. If you look at the heat map below it, the support seems to go strong across all uh, categories of demographics, just high in all areas, all regions of North Carolina, whether it be rural, suburban, urban, type of party registration across income, very strong support for this. I also know that when that comes up, we also know that when those issues come up, there are substantive issues raised from school districts about how this program is going to be carried out. Kayla, next slide, please. So, one of the issues that frequently comes up is the issue of student transportation and whose responsibility should it be to take a student from one school to another school. If they are able to attend another school within the district, who should be responsible for the student's transportation? The question specifically read, if a student attends a public school other than their assigned school, who should be responsible for their student's transportation? Overwhelmingly, respondents said parent has the responsibility, about 63%. The next highest response was a shared responsibility, which was about 20%. And the numbers, even beneath that, are pretty negligible. State responsibility about 7%, responsibility of the receiving school 6%, et cetera. So there seems to be an overwhelming agreement that the parent has the responsibility or should have the responsibility of transportation, and if a child attends another school in that within that district. And then the next slide, please. Actually, well, actually, wait, we do have, how are we on time, Bryce?
Yeah, I think we're getting to the Q&A portion here. One question I really did want to highlight, and I don't know if you have this in your slide, is what the public's biggest concern is as it relates to public schools. Do you have that in here?
Yeah, I couldn't include all that in there.
So I don't want to end your presentation short, but I pulled that up just because I really do think for purposes of our audience, this is very informative. So the as part of this poll, one of the
Yeah, I
questions,
can go ahead, Bryce. I mean, I can
sure,
speak
sure.
to that.
Yeah, yeah. So voters were asked, in your opinion, what is the most challenging issue facing K through 12 public education? And a plurality of voters, and they were given a list of about 7 or 8 different options. A plurality said shortage of high quality teachers. So about 1 in 5, 20% of the people that took this poll pointed to the shortage of high quality teachers as what they see as the biggest challenge facing public education. Um, Adequate finances came in at about 13%. And then coming into the second most selected option were academic standards. So two things that are very related, sort of the academic quality of education that students are receiving and a shortage of high quality teachers came up to about 35%. So over 1/3 of voters selected those two options. And I just, for the purposes of the folks we have on the call today, I wanted to make sure that we got to that question. Bob, did you want to? I'll give you a moment here if you had any other thoughts, and then we'll
Yeah,
do
I think
end the Q&A.
just in that for the sake of keeping things tight, I think it's well worth noting, Bryce, um, especially for this group, about what people were thinking about what the key issues were. Um, I It's important to note that shortage, you might not have this as the the graphics there, but shortage of high quality teachers came up first the last 2 years in a row.
Yes.
So that's important. And I think um, the second and third issues, adequate finances and academic standards, were pretty much second and third also, which means people feel strongly about
Hmm.
those concerns, and they're they're sentiments that have been there for a while. So
Yeah.
it's something that obviously it needs to be addressed, and people should know about it. So